How about now? Try that. Welcome, folks, to the Diversity Research Action Consortium. This is a distinguished lecture series. Today, I have my colleagues Kara Ieva and Jordan Beasley, and I'm Sam Steen. I am the director of this consortium. I inherited this consortium years ago, probably 2 or 3 years ago, and it took me a while to kind of get my bearings on how I wanted to use it. So now we have distinguished lectures. I'll tell you why these two folks are distinguished here shortly. We have book lecture series. We put out professional development, which is at this point always free and open to the public. So we'll record this session today and post it to our website here shortly. So, distinguished lectures, right? The reason why I believe you are considered distinguished, and I get to decide this as the director of the consortium. So, Kara Ieva, you are one of the first people that I know to have won a National Science Foundation grant like years and years ago. And now we're winning them. It's like such a big deal, but you are distinguished in that you were one of the first. You also, in my mind, received full professor before me, and so you're distinguished in that way. Not like, oh, you're cooler than me or I'm cooler than you, so why'd you get it first? No, distinguished in once you had it, you still maintain the sense of genuineness and authenticity, and you became a role model for me. So I feel like you're distinguished in that way. And one other thing I can say that you're distinguished in how you use your creativity and all of your neurodivergent gifts and crafts to challenge the status quo in your writing, in your presentation, and in just our daily conversations. And so I appreciate that. And
Thanks, Sam.
Jordan Beasley. We have met under unorthodox way, but what distinguishes you is your ability to use your deep interest and experience in school counseling to inform all of your research, teaching, and service, and you don't settle for the comforts that are associated with the ivory tower. I think that distinguishes you. You live in a state that is very conservative, right? We can relate to that in some ways, and you embrace your whiteness while combating systemic barriers and rampant oppression that still remains in our schools. That distinguishes you at this stage of your career. Another one is that you love program evaluation, but you're able to break it down in a way that really laymen can understand it. And you also infuse an equity and sort of access approach to that along the way. And I really love that. And finally, for both of you, I would say you all are distinguished in that. I don't know how to say this without being too all over the place, but you are my dear friends and colleagues. And I see you as like this dyad or triad when we're together. It's family. There's no other way to say it. So you're distinguished in my mind that we truly are family members. So at this point, I'll be quiet. This session, spend about 40 minutes going through your work. Tell us what you're going to talk about. And then at the end, around 12 o'clock, we'll spend about 15 minutes seeing if there's anybody who's interested in sharing feedback. I'll turn my camera off. I'll come back in at that point in time, and then maybe we can have a discussion. And along the way, if you have a question or answers, folks, feel free to put it in the chat.
Before we get started, Sam, I would just like to ask publicly while it's being recorded if you will write a eulogy for me one day, because I don't think anybody has ever seen me quite that much and been so sweet and eloquent. So thank you for that.
Well, that was my algebra homework, Kara. Okay, so I'll see you
Yes.
all shortly. Have fun.
I know that now. Welcome, everyone, to what I would call our Thursday morning research meetings, which does typically take place at this time. And so we are excited to actually also share with you some of our research in exploring Educator SEL. So as Sam nicely put it, I'm Kara Ieva, and this is Jordan Beasley, and we're here to share with you this evolution of research that we are working on. And so everyone comes here for a different reason. Some people come here for the outcomes, some people come for the research methodology, and some people just come to see people they know and learn along the way. Whatever that is for you, we're just glad that you are here. And thinking about that, we've never changed our bio. I didn't take the right slide, so we're just going to keep that moving. Yep. But in true fashion, and particularly when we talk about SEL, we're going to do a quick little check-in. So thank you for being with us today. And our current participants who are here, I'm going to ask you this question while we're going to share it also in what brings you joy. And for me, I know I should say my wife and my kids, but I don't. I typically tell people that coffee brings me joy. I go to bed thinking about that morning cup of coffee. I'm very specific on that first and second cup of coffee. And if it could be by water and by myself, it's even better. Jordan, what about you?
I feel like I should have been more prepared because I helped create the slides. But what brings me joy, in addition to coffee, I would say being outside, going for a walk outside, especially right now when it's fall and it's beautiful. That brings me so much joy.
What you don't know, Jordan, is that Christina in the chat also just put the exact same, like word for word as you had it. And Olga, I'm with you. Travel is probably the second one I would have shared in that mix. So thank you for being here today. And Sam mentioned this, and I would like to say, if you have questions along the way, please feel free to put it in the chat and we will address this as we go. We want to answer your questions. A little bit about us is that while Sam and I have known each other for years, we've started working together in 2019, which is also when Jordan also joined our team. And our our research really centered around group counseling. And so for a while, we really wanted to recreate or take a decade and a half later from a really pinnacle article that Sam had on what group counseling look like in school counseling. And since then, we've kind of been on these journeys through a critical lens of looking at ourselves, looking at systems, and also through this group space. And so we've really honed in on really thinking about where group counseling is today. We specifically spent some time looking at affinity groups, and then also how we use groups with Educator SEL, which is what we're going to talk about today. And so this is our evolution of our family, as Sam likes to call it. I also call it the Group Research Collaborative. So today we're going to talk about two studies in the evolution of our research regarding Educator SEL. We're going to talk about really this exploratory study involving practicing school counselors and doc students. And then we're going to explore some of the data from running these groups in schools as well. So here we go. Woo! I don't think this is new news, so I'm just going to rehash this. You know, people aren't doing well per se in school. Education is under a microscope. There's a lot less resources and a lot more placed on our teachers specifically. We do know that prior to the pandemic, we were also already in a youth mental health crisis. In a post-pandemic world, our adults are now 1 in 4 either diagnosed with mental health or substance abuse, or 1 in 3 from the range between 18 and 23, I believe. Simultaneously to that, while teachers are being asked to do more, they've also been asked to provide opportunities for social emotional learning in their classrooms, even though they were not prepared to do that. And then thinking about school counseling overall, what is our role within SEL? We've always had a piece of it, particularly for teaching all of the students SEL. And a lot of that happened in delivering a tiered approach through MTSS. But we're at a place in space where how do you be much more preventative than reactive? Because we're a lot more reactive in school. And as you know, there's many things facing both adults and kids, and these are just some of them, right? The political climate, all of the anti-legislation. And because we're in a place and space where both adults and kids alike have access to the internet or social media, they are much more aware, even if these things aren't happening directly to them, they can see them from a secondary aspect. So let's get into it. So this first study is called School Counselors Implementation of Educator SEL Interventions, a Critical Participatory Action and Healing Study. There are a lot of words that are wrapped up in that we're going to break it down for you what that looked like. So as we talked about, our group, Jordan, Sam, and I, meet every week, and we've been collaborating. And so they've also been consulting in this aspect. And so it is a collaboration of the three of us, and also these three students who are practicing school counselors and also PhD students that I happen to have for an advanced practicum class. And so one of the things to think about going into this is advanced practicum typically is something we work on individual skills, or they showcase and advance them. And one of the things that they talked about is they're so burnt out from school and doing their jobs, they didn't want to see any more kids. So what does that mean for them? That meant maybe we start looking at the adults. So in thinking about just our theoretical frameworks, I'm just going to mention them briefly for those of you who are interested. We are looking from a conceptual framework, a healing research methodology. And what I will say in short in this is that it really does take a critical stance and includes a lot of indigenous aspects and liberation methodologies. But one of the goals through research is healing. In addition to that, I also like to use Bronfenbrenner's bioecological systems, because we all interact in several levels of different systems at different times and over the course of development in your life. And all of those interactions do play out to who we are and how we see the world, and also our coping mechanisms as well. And then adding that into that, a really critical lens of addressing power, privilege, and intersectionality within ourselves and within the system. And so it really, for us, set the stage on how we went about doing this research. And collectively, it also then pairs with the methodology that we use, which is participatory action research. And for those of you who don't know what participatory action research is that the participants are actually co-researchers, and we are addressing something in the field, a problem. And for us, we did a critical participatory action research, which really gives us that critical lens of really interrogating the systems with power, privilege, and intersectionality. And so as part of our class, we engaged in this methodology for it. The action research cycle, just so people know, is that you identify a problem, you plan, you implement it, and then you observe and collect data as a result, reflect on it, and you keep going through a process. What was different about this particular process for us is I was providing supervision to the students who were also doing this, and we'll tell you a little bit more about that. So there was an extra added cycle in here. So in identifying the problem, what you are looking at is really the layers of what students and teachers face before even getting ready to go to class. As you can imagine, just in speaking about teachers, right? They have, just like students, they have what goes on in their homes and in their environments and in their communities. Then they transition into school. Teachers are also faced with, you know, under-resourced funding, curricula mandates, lots of demands, testing, you know, you name it. And then they have to prep for class and then show up to be the best version of themselves. And one of the things that all of our students talked about is that teachers are having a really hard time regulating themselves. Therefore, how are they going to be able to co-regulate students in order to heal, right? And to create a co-healing space so that students can learn and in that space. And so we go back to really the heart of this is Dr. Bruce Perry, who talks about a dysregulated adult will never regulate a dysregulated kid. And keeping in mind, a dysregulated kid is not able to input information to learn, right? So for them, the largest problem was thinking about it was actually the teachers. And so there is a healing continuum on things that have to happen in order for healing to take place. And it ranges from doing internal work and also setting up external spaces. And we kind of fit in the middle of that. So just so you know, that was our problem. So we spent a lot of time thinking about this cycle of participatory action research from a critical lens, and we really reflected. And for them, it took us 5 sessions of planning to decide, like, hey, teachers, this is our hardest year, and teachers are a part of this. They also know that as school counselors, we consult. And so how does this look different from the consultation that we're giving individually to our students? And so we came up with this as a problem. We came up with this as a plan. We created what we call Educator or Educell intakes and outtakes. And then it was very flexible to how the students wanted to do this. And so I say this today that some students did individual sessions, some did group sessions, and some did both. One of the things that we did have to start with was really an operationalized definition of educator SEL. And that's important because it continues through all of this research, but it really is defined. It starts with the definition from SEL, which is, as we know, a crucial aspect of human development. It also falls along the lines of looking at the big 5 competencies from CASEL, which is self-awareness, self-management, relationship skills, social awareness, and responsible decision making. And then CASEL also does talk about adult SEL, and they do define it as a continuum development so that people can learn and model. What was missing for us, and as we've shared based on where we started, was really this critical lens of really also doing this internal work for themselves and really exploring and learning. And so that they can also contribute to what we are calling their own healing experience. And so every session, whether or not it was individual or group, followed the same structure that we all agreed to. There was, similar to today, there was a check-in with a fun question. There was an experiential activity aimed at the goal, whatever the topic was. There was a guided reflection in which it encouraged them to really dig deeper a little bit more about their thoughts and emotions. And then there was processing and a lot of interpersonal dialogue as a result of it, both in a group session and in individual. They self-disclosed for part of that. And then there was a connection to each other and then how to apply it into teaching. So think of a quick 45-minute session that really geared all towards this. Sorry. And so for data purposes, we had recordings of our supervisory sessions, which also included how we gave peer feedback and consultation. It also included their sessions that were recorded, both group and individual, as well as their reflection journals and also the intake and outtake with their educators. And so going through an analyzation process, we really did do initial readings on our own and came back with our own kind of codes. We started identifying patterns and kind of whittled down to some themes, and then did a second round on our own and came back to land on the final themes that came out of this particular study. So one of the things that was really clear was that the emergence of a co-healing space. I guess I didn't share this, I also did Educator SEL with them in each of their sessions to start. And so there was this level of modeling for them and them co-creating it with their educators, and then with the hope that the educators create that same space for their teachers. It was also an opportunity for them to advance their counseling skills and supervision skills that they had taken in the previous semester. And that was really clear in the sense that they were able to recognize different aspects of using skills and also recognizing that they were advancing themselves in that process. And that came out a lot during our supervisory sessions. This is a huge one for me. A counselor needs a counselor. It is what they shared is that they could not do this work without supervision. And as you know, one of the things that we don't have right now in school counseling is clinical supervision. We have administrative supervision and we push for peer supervision, but we don't have clinical supervision. And they did talk about they would not be able to do this work if that was not a part of it. what I found cool about this experience is this cognitive awakening, in the sense that it really was a transformative process. Teachers reported, or the educators reported, that they didn't know enough about SEL, and like they would just kind of, they knew it as a term, but they didn't internalize it. And so both the teachers and the school counselors pointed out the process where it was a very external thing, and then throughout sessions, they started using the vocabulary, had emotional literacy. And so then we now know they're also able to use that with students. And so this cognitive awakening was a huge piece to that. The ripple effect in two ways. One was really about how what I modeled went to them, went to teachers, went to students, if you think about it in that particular way. And so it was, for the school counselor specifically, it was really cool to see it because they also report other teachers starting hanging around and coming to say hi because they knew it was happening, but they weren't necessarily part of it. And then the last piece that we found was that the dynamics that happened in the group aspects, I was doing group as well as another one of them, really led for a lot more what we'll call learning in that process. And so it was really discussed about group being, one, reasonable to be able to do during the day, but even teachers said the same thing, that they really enjoyed getting to connect with other teachers that they wouldn't necessarily do as well. So with that, I'm almost done, Jordan. There are several implications, just to name a few. One of them really is looking at the role of the school counselor. We are named as leaders and advocates, and really facilitators of systemic change. And this is one piece of that. And if we're thinking about how to be preventative, how do we hit more kids? And in some ways, being able to work with the teachers on their own educator SEL was a huge piece to that. And it is a proactive and collaborative approach. I'm going to highlight here again that it really does require clinical supervision. What came out a lot in this also was that there were times where their trauma would come out. There was times where there was transference on the school counselor's part, and we were able to discuss. And so I can't emphasize that enough. And then also integrating it in counselor training programs. While we were always responsible for developing SEL with students, I can't say it was also the center of what we did in training. And to think about it from a lifelong development aspect for both kids and adults is really something to consider in our training programs as well. And really, how this as an intervention can work within our multi-tiered systems of support with working with students. Jordan, is there anything you want to add to that before we head on into the evolution of where we went after? Because because in visualizing this, this is kind of how we looked at what that impact was. We were providing services, right, to both master students at the time and also the teachers in the building. And so when we think about it in this realm, there's a lot of impact in that way. So when we talk about preventative work, this is one way of doing it. And then we left this research study really redefining what we thought educator SEL was as a result. And just in short, it really is a dynamic process. And what also came out in that particular piece is that until we do this internal work on our own SEL, educators and adults alike, it's really also hard to get to the equity work. And so it really is a precursor to really being able to also have a critical lens. And there it is.
Okay, so Kara, I'm wondering, okay, great. So
Yeah.
it was just that one slide that didn't carry over.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I got everything else.
Perfect.
Mhm.
Perfect. I was concerned that we were going to have to do like a switcheroo thing, but it's fine. Everything's fine.
No, I only copied your slides because when I downloaded it, all the PowerPoint stuff didn't come through. So I kept the original. So that was my
Gotcha.
bad.
Okay, no big deal. So I'm gonna catch up with you. Perfect. So one really cool thing about this study is it's kind of a meta study. So these are two different papers that we are working on and writing right now. And another layer that makes it so cool is that Kara, Dr. Aiva, was an active participant in this intervention, and then Sam, Dr. Steen, and I are objective consultants on it. And so we're getting the subjective heart piece of this work, and then we're also able to view it from an objective lens as well. And so I'm glad that Kara went first, because she really set the stage for what this study is too. So where Kara's study really focuses, or not Kara's study, we're all working on them together, but the one that Kara presented to you is really about the participants being the school counseling PhD students who were implementing this research, or who were implementing these interventions. So this next article is called Enhancing Educator Wellness, Social Emotional Learning Through Psychoeducational Support Groups, but it should really be Psychoeducational Support Interventions. But what this article really focuses on the participants being the educators, the people who actually received the intervention. And so we'll go through the educational landscape. We'll talk about transformative educator SEL and why transformative is a bit problematic of a term. We'll talk a little bit about the methodology, and then we'll talk about the findings and the implications. Okay, so the educator shortage crisis is no secret. It is everywhere in the United States. We are all seeing it. This 2004-2005 school year began with over 55,000 vacant teaching positions, with 86% of school districts saying that they were having trouble filling in these gaps, filling in job openings. And so part of that shortage is teacher well-being. Teachers are coming into the profession bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and they're getting really burnt out. There are extremely high demands, extremely high workloads, very unrealistic expectations, and they're burnout, they're stressed, they have low job satisfaction. And while we think, research shows that while we think it's those large workloads and those high demands that are driving teachers away from the field, research actually says that's not it. It's actually the lack of support. They're not feeling valued, they're not feeling supported, and they're not feeling like anybody is seeing them as a human. They just keep continuing to get more and more on them without any sort of emotional or human connection. And so we know that mental health is so important. The attention to mental health is growing. The attention to educator mental health is growing, but the support is still not there. According to what is it called? The NCES, the National Center for Education Studies. Is that it? Yes. According to them, only 59% of public schools are offering EAPs. EAPs are employee assistant programs. That's how you can go about getting free psychological services, free therapy. Only 59% are offering that. Only 15, and then an additional 15% say there's no mental health services at all. They're not doing anything to promote their teacher wellness. And then there are 33% of schools that are saying, okay, well, we are providing mental health professional development, but that led us to think, what does that actually mean? So addressing mental health for educators is essential for retention and creating positive learning environments. So let's talk a little bit more about enhancing educator well-being through equitable SEL. So the benefits, we don't even really need to go over. We know that it goes over, it enhances emotional well-being, it alleviates burnout, it manages stress. But more importantly, students learn through observation, through modeling, through interaction. So when teachers are up giving these direct lessons on how to make responsible decisions or how to have good self-management or control their emotions, and then they see that same teacher yelling or throwing an expo marker, that counteracts that direct lesson that you just did. So we can't expect teachers who are unwell, who are not in their best emotional and mental state and capacity to teach these things with fidelity, because they don't feel it. And students know, students can tell. And then this also, Adult Educator SEL facilitates cultural competence. So you need cultural competence to do equitable SEL, and you need equitable SEL to do to be culturally competent. So it's this iterative process. Cultural competence is the ability to critically examine social and cultural identities, and then to appreciate and to honor diversity. So then there's these challenges. So SEL's great. Castle's done so much transformative, or what is it called? Transformative ed. All these people have done so many things with SEL. Well, there are some gaps there. There's a gap when it comes to equity. There's a gap when it comes to cultural appropriateness. Dina Simmons said, without an equitable approach, SEL is just white supremacy with a hug. We know that sometimes we can use these behaviors in SEL to police students and to police adults. And that can be grounded in systemic racism and trauma. And so it requires this cultural competence piece in order for SEL to really be culturally affirming, culturally sustaining, and really benefiting the wellness of all. So there's this need for an equitable SEL, which means we're shifting from this deficit model, or we need to fix kids, to a systemic approach of let's get the adults healthy. Let's work on parents. Let's work on teachers. Let's work on environments, and then that will trickle down, like Kara just showed that bioecological model. So the focus here is on cultural responsiveness and intersecting identities. So that leads to one second, Kara. And I'm going to let Kara talk about this too, because she is a little well versed in it than I am. But the research uses the term transformative SEL. And what they mean by that is that it addresses educational, social, and economic disparities. But if you really, and that sounds beautiful and wonderful, but if you dig a little deeper, what that actually is a very whitewashed term. And so in order to create that responsiveness and to create healing and wellness and breaking down those systemic barriers, we termed EduSEL, or as Kara called it, EduSEL. So we don't like to use the word transformative, but that is the terms that you would find in the literature. We're building on that through a critical lens. Okay, so this led me into a very deep dive. So if this is the psychoeducational support interventions that, Kara is offering through Rowan, and she's teaching her students how to do, this is so important, she does all this professional development, then what else is out there? What else is going on? And so actually, I have a lot of information to share on that I will cut short. So there was a meta-analysis done, and they found 13 studies on SEL targeted professional development. Now, there were some issues and some problems that came along with that, and then there were some really good things that we decided, hey, that's awesome research. Let's build on that. Let's expand that. So despite the findings from these SEL professional developments, they found that there's really no statistically significant difference between if you do it individually or in groups or in whole person SEL. And we found that to be great because that means we can target individuals on all levels. What's more important is the content and how individuals are engaged in that work. So, despite the findings, small group counseling presents to be a very promising avenue, even though it wasn't statistically significant, because small groups offer these valuable opportunities for feedback, for insight, for connection, to develop trust, this universality of a shared experience. And so this supportive environment is great, and it fosters vulnerability, and it lets people know that they're not alone, and they're in a room full of people who are experiencing the same things as them and struggling in the same ways that they are. And it's also a time to share your wins and to be celebrated with one another. So it's a really powerful environment. So there were two studies in particular. One was a teacher study group, and that was very effective. It was done by Benner and his colleagues, and what that aims to do is enhance both the teacher and the student's SEL by providing this collaborative space for teachers to reflect on their practices and share their experiences in delivering SEL instruction. What that did not offer is any sort of SEL instruction for the educator. So we know that teachers are already not being trained in SEL, and then we're putting them in these precarious situations where they're expected to teach it without receiving any sort of additional training, without experiencing it for themselves. And so while this collaborative space was really helpful in brainstorming, it didn't allow them any other educational or experiential opportunities for themselves. The next article was a teacher support group. And so this one was awesome too. So this was an SEL space. And this was a support group that addressed critical issues where teachers could come and they could talk with one another and be with one another and support one another in the burnout that they were experiencing and the stress that they were experiencing. And so again, it was this place for them to tackle these challenges and to support one another, but that education piece was still missing. And that is critical. Thank you, Kara. So we built on that, and I guess I should have taken the transformative out of here and just put EduSEL, psychoeducational support groups for educators. So this is where we are going in our research. We have found this to be the most responsive next step to what is currently being done. So the purpose of this is to build on those teacher study groups, to build on those support groups, but we want to implement an equity-centered SEL support group that prioritizes the educator. We want to prioritize their well-being. We want to prioritize their education. We want to prioritize their experience. We want them to become more socially and emotionally competent. So our research questions were, how are these psychoeducational groups that Kara and her students were already doing, how are these effective at enhancing social emotional competence among the teachers, the educators that they were working with? And then there's also a mixed methods approach to it of we want to know what were their personal benefits? What did they identify from having attended these sessions? How is that going to personally change them? And also how is that going to professionally change them? Okay, so luckily we have some quantitative data too, because as we know, as wonderful as the story is, a lot of times funders, a lot of times school districts, a lot of times these decision makers, they want to see numbers. And so Kara and her students were prepared for that, and they created this intake questionnaire and this outtake questionnaire that led to this really beautiful data. And so they asked, to what degree do you think you are more aware in the following areas as a result of participating in the Educator SEL group sessions? And the thing about this is this intake goes through the 5 competencies that we've already talked about, the Castle Big 5. And I'm sure even if you don't look at research at all, that you can see that that significance 0.000 was all the way down across every single competency. So as from self-awareness to social awareness to self-management to responsible decision-making, there was a significant difference in the participant self-report from how they viewed their competence in that area before and how they viewed their competence in that area after. So this is the part of the study that we're currently on. Olga and Christina, you're actually very lucky because this is not even out yet. We aren't even done analyzing this work, and we're sharing it with you. So, don't plagiarize it, but here it is. What we plan to do is then code these responses. So we ask the educators, what are some personal benefits that you got from this work? And so this is their individual responses. Our research plan from here is then to code those responses so that we can come up with themes. But they talked about having an opportunity to discuss these big topics in a safe environment. If you've ever been an educator and you've ever been a teacher and you've ever been in a school, you know that not all educational environments are safe. They're not safe emotionally, and unfortunately today, they're not even safe physically. And so the fact that we have this co-healing space that goes back to what Kara had mentioned previously, that educators and the participants are both feeling that. Also talking about increasing our self-awareness, how we communicate, wanting to better ourselves, wanting to understand our own identity, really understanding like why we are the way we are. It's helped us to think before we respond to children, to adults, and that's a really big deal in our world, to think before you speak, especially as adults. So it's really showing concern for other people, not just inside school, not just what's going on in the classroom next to you, but on a personal level, just general wellness and altruism amongst the school. Just having, yeah, an ability to connect. So I can tell Kara's rushing me because I got 5 minutes. All right, professional benefits. So it helped me realize what I was and wasn't doing to be an effective teacher. It gave me the opportunity and a chance to meet with building community among staff. It's giving me reassurance in areas that I'm questioning, an educator implementing different lessons and skills into our curriculum. It's a lot easier for those things to come naturally and to naturally embed in a curriculum when you've had the experience yourself. Again, coming up with communication, better relationships with students, checking our own biases and looking internally, and then more patience. I could use that myself. And then our own self-awareness and relationships within our work settings. So these are kind of preliminary implications. Again, we have not fully analyzed the data, but these are some things that have already come up for me so far. But there's this enhanced teacher effectiveness. The research shows that teachers are better at their jobs when they're healthy, when they're happy, when they feel supported. And so this could help them be even better teachers in the classroom to their students, but also among each other. So that strengthened professional community, feeling like you can relate and that you care, and building that school climate is very important. Those improved communication skills, so just being able to interact professionally and interpersonally with one another, and being able to model positive communication in front of students. So there's this heightened sense of empathy and awareness, which I wish we could just shower in our schools. And then helping with stress. The reality is the workload for teachers is never going to get smaller. The demands are never going to decrease. And so as the student mental health crisis grows, and then we know that there are academic implications from COVID. And so as we are having to be more and more and more responsive to students, we have to be able to manage that stress and to feel wellness amongst ourselves. And then just the opportunity for personal growth and self-discovery. We know that schools are not offering this. If only 59% are offering you an employee assistant program and 15% are offering you nothing, how often are you in a situation, are you in an environment that promotes your own personal growth, that cares about your self-discovery, that wants you to reach your fullest potential? And these spaces foster that. They foster that community. So that's all we have so far, Kara. If there's anything that you want to add as the participant, I do want to give opportunity and time for other people to talk and ask us questions and engage.
Yeah, no, I think that was right on the nose. One of the things that Jordan mentioned in both her implications and actually in the study, and this also came up with ours, is that in a group setting, there's this embedded aspect that already advances social awareness as a result of just being in a group. And I think that also kind of came out in your implications as well. And so I think that that is something to remember. Not only can we reach more people in that way, it provides a space. It already advances a skill set in some ways as well. I'm going to stop sharing our screen. And I did see the conversation that Christina and Sam were having in the text. And Christina, just to add on to that, it is true about common language. So while I was delivering this, I simultaneously also delivered to parents. And so they wanted parents to have the same knowledge base as the teachers were talking about with their students as well. So I agree with you in a systemic approach that, common language is a huge piece of this.
Well, thank you, folks. So Christina and Olga, you have the luxury of being a part of a larger audience as it's recorded, but please don't shy away from unmuting yourself and chiming in. Using the chat is fine as well. I'm going to ask a few questions, and then 12:15 on the dot, whether we're midstream or not, we're just going to shut it down. And if you need to leave early, we're not offended, right? We're going to keep doing this because now I get a chance to have a conversation. It was so weird watching you like present. And I'm glad you had your button muted, Carol, when Jordan was presenting, because I know you want to say something.
I didn't. I actually needed, to her point, I needed the objective lens looking at it from her
To
lens,
hear
and
it,
I
right?
loved it. Yeah.
Well, okay,
Yeah.
so I'm used to you like, oh, what? You know, and I didn't see that. And so, okay. So my first question really, actually, it's kind of like a reflection and then a question. I think I have two
Are
or
we
three.
seeing if they have a question first or your
Well,
word?
I'm
Oh,
hoping
sorry.
that I'm opening the door so they won't be bashful. So I'm not trying to take up all the time. I'm just saying they can shut me down right now. But if it's okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and ask. The first question is like, I look at it, I'm a school counselor as well. It's like this is kind of like common sense. You know what I mean? Like, oh, let's help people feel better about themselves, and then they're gonna help those who in which they work with. Okay, so then what are the surprises? Jordan, tell me your surprise in the study. Kara, what's a surprise in the study that maybe either you didn't present or we just didn't know?
Go ahead, Jordan, you go first.
I am reflecting on that question for a second. The surprises. Give me a second.
I have a reaction to your leading up to it, like it's common sense.
Mhm.
Right? But if we think about schools in general, schools were built on white middle class values, and the center purpose really came down to there is knowledge that we want students to have and skills that we want them to, and not even skills, actually knowledge when they leave school. And I think we still operate that way, which is why we're so heavy on testing and things of that nature. So it is, and I've heard Jordan actually say this before, things are, and actually one of our doc students, things are always student driven. It's never educator driven. And so while it does seem common sense to me, and both Jordan and Sam know this, my mantra is a planning and a process period, essentially, is that there is no time in the day for them to just stop and breathe and and regain themselves. And also, like, we believe education to be a reflective process. We believe teaching pedagogically is a reflective process on what we change as a result. Action research actually came out of education for that reason. And so it's shocking to me that we sold it as a profession in that way, but we don't provide the opportunity for teachers in that particular way. And because Jordan did this visually, but because the mental health crisis in kids is amping up and their brains have shifted, we didn't even talk about this from a neuroscience standpoint. What teachers are being asked to do doesn't actually match who kids are. And so that already puts, if there's no relationships and having that healing space, then they're already at
Well,
what I'll
that's what
call
I'm
a
saying.
contentious
That's the part
program.
that I'm saying is like common sense, maybe
Yeah.
not for the educator, but the school counselors were like, hey, if they're healthy, if we're healthy, we can access the curriculum, right?
Correct.
And so I'm not suggesting that the research not legitimate. I'm saying what's surprising in there for you all because you have this lens already. You're like, we know this. That's why we're forging this area to make it applicable, accessible for others to create space in the environment to do this. What stood out to you as surprising in the work? Jordan, you ready now?
Eric, can I respond real quick? So it takes
Yeah.
a second. I'm a processor. And so it takes me a second to really thoughtfully consider what you're asking. And there are three surprises. One is from my hat as a researcher. Right now, the bulk of SEL educator literature or social emotional literature regarding adults focuses on the lack. So there's not a ton of research out there about what is being done.
Actually, to do.
So we
Okay.
have these implications and we have these
That's a great point.
hypotheses and we have these theories of what's going to happen when teachers are healthy, when teachers are well. It's going to help them in this way. They're going to feel this way. And what is so surprising to me is that the little research that we are doing, that we're just starting, backs that up. As you guys know, we have done a ton of research, especially with our affinity group research, where the results did not match the previous literature. It was like, this is a new day, this is a new time, that is old school. But this research matched. our
Mm.
findings match. And that is so surprising to me, and it makes me so happy, because we have a foundation, I guess. It gives this springboard, and it gives this extra layer of support and validity to the work.
Yeah.
So that's my surprise as a researcher. As a school counselor, a former school counselor educator, school counselor cheerleader, I just see so many opportunities within the entire system, not just with students, for school counselors to really flourish and to shine, and for people to
Mm.
understand your role and understand your training, and to really truly be able to make that impact that you've always wanted to make, and that you know that you can make, and other people may not be aware of that. But I'm just so excited. I'm not surprised. I'm just so excited to see an avenue for that work on a systemic level. And then my last thing, you can tell I'm really passionate because I'm getting really excited. I am a supervisor, so I work with interns and I do site visits. And one of our school districts, the school counselors are in this particular school district, are creating, research-informed, evidence-based, social-emotional lessons for the entire school. But then guess who is being charged with implementing those lessons? The
Teachers.
teachers.
Mhm.
And so I was actually talking about this work just this week, talking to those school counselors about, have you considered working with your staff? Have you considered doing educator sessions? Because I get it. In a middle school of 1,400 students, those 2 school counselors probably can't go class to
They
class.
can't do all that, right?
So maybe it is appropriate for teachers to implement those lessons. But what's more appropriate is for teachers to be socially and emotionally well, and to be able to model what they're teaching.
I love it. Okay, I love it.
I'm
Thank
done
you.
talking.
But
Got that.
before you go to a question,
Yeah,
I just want to
yeah.
counterbalance what I saw in one of the school counseling social media groups this week. So there are principals who are mandating school counselors to actually work with the faculty and staff in providing some sort of aspect. And everyone as a school counselor is in disagreement about whether or not that's their job or not. And so just to put out here in a sense that, we actually built this off of a consultation model, which is already our job as a result. So we can individually consult with teachers, but we can't do it in larger settings to reach more
ridiculous.
of them. And to Jordan's point, part of it is not all training grounds are the same, right? Some are
Absolutely.
60 credit mental health focused, and others are, hey, we have 36 credits and now we're accredited in our state as a school counselor. But the reality is, majority of programs at this point in time have a mental health focus. And so things like coordinating testing and HIB and 504s, those are actually non-essential duties, but what the schools haven't caught up. And so what I love about what Jordan is saying is like, this is where we get to use our clinical skills and to highlight and to showcase it. And as a result of that, we might be able to get this other stuff off our plate. And then in my world, I see the teachers in this small environment as professional development and basically coaching in a way. Whereas for the school counselors, they will still need some level of supervision based on all of what they're seeing.
Definitely. And the research you're doing, it's like that parallel process. You're showing us,
Yes.
you're carving out, etc. I don't want to repeat that. So Olga and Christina, a question, chat it up or not. I have one more and I'm waiting. I don't want to like slow this process down.
While we wait on that question, I
Okay,
just want
great.
to
It's right there. Okay.
we should research how school counselors are implementing SEL if they are mandated to do it. I'd love to hear about their experiences. I just want to say that while it's being recorded. That's a great research agenda. Next
Say
thing.
that again. Sorry, it was recorded, but I was multitasking. Say it again, Jordan.
I want to understand the experiences of school counselors who are being tasked with doing educator SEL, or I wouldn't call it educator.
Well, this is what they're
But
talking
doing
about.
SEL with educators. I want to know more about those experiences. I personally was tasked with that when I worked in Atlanta, and it was not great. And that's my experience. And for another time, let's get to Olga or
Can
Christina.
you see it? It's actually they
Yes.
work together and it's virtual. It's virtual, so you have some of those opportunities and
I'm
challenges,
just going to add
right?
that
And we
Christina
got
is a
Texas.
former student.
Well, that's for her to self-disclose. She might not
Yeah.
want to claim you as a professor. You never know. No,
Well,
I'm
she
just gonna-
claimed it on social media when she registered.
All right, I'm going to read. We just recently held our first ever parent session that had a huge turnout, which was somewhat unexpected, especially in Texas, but a good thing. We worked specifically with the at-risk population within the school, and in one of our sessions, we found that the parents/caretakers came in a bit defensive. And I'm curious if you have run into that with
Yes.
parents as you work with them, as you start, and how you would combat that in a group setting.
Yeah,
Experts?
so let's just start here with Jordan's comment. She talked about Dina Simmons talking about SEL's white supremacy with a hug. Um, there is in a lot of places and spaces, when we went back in after COVID and transitioning in, I don't know if you remember, but there was a document that the United States, Department of Education shared, and in it was ways in which to connect through SEL, and it was actually from Bettina Love. And what happened is in the algorithms, their AI bots, it got attacked. So SEL is under attack from a conservative perspective because they believe, and how I'm understanding is that we are brainwashing children
Yeah.
instead of having lifelong learning skills that help them, right, achieve successful lives. So a lot of the pushback on SEL is very targeted specifically. So
And this
that
is
does
talking
not
about
shocking.
That's not shocking at all. And I'm hearing, Jordan, I'll let you, you're the expert here. The topic was time management. They polled the parents, they knew, but they're wondering if sharing this information with staff would have been helpful. So it's like definitely the collaboration is always helpful. But Jordan, any reaction to that last piece there?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about because it says if you've ever run into that, and I have.
Yes.
And so what I have run into in my experience is a lot of times it is the parent or the teacher that you're polling, and so they kind of tell you the topic, and then they come in kind of hot and bothered about it,
Right,
and
right.
so they're maybe being a little combative or defensive. But what I've found is that a lot of times teachers, parents, people, whoever it is, they're more likely to highlight a thing that they're already kind of peeved about. So they probably already had some emotional reaction, anger, fear, sadness, whatever it is, about time management. And what I have learned is that the first 15 minutes of a class, the first 15 minutes of a session, the first 15 minutes of anything, I always say, tell me what comes up. Why did you pick this? Because they're going to be combative either way because they came in to be combative. So no matter what you say, it doesn't matter until you've allowed them to speak their piece, until they've been heard, and just say that. Like, this is an open space. I want to give you an opportunity to say what you want to say. You selected this topic for a reason. If you're angry, tell me why. If somebody's hurt your feelings about this, tell me about that. And then let's talk about that together and how we can look at this a different way and partner and collaborate with how we can benefit our students because
Okay, so
people want to be
la
heard.
last one. Olga's like, true, we're on the same page, and I hear you using those skills, right? Even in that delivery and recognizing we are part of a system, and therefore people might already come in a little bit on
Yeah.
edge.
They chose
Your
it for a reason,
your
you know.
topic was exploring educator SEL and emotional learning research. We got it, 2 articles about this, but the implications for inclusion and culturally responsive learning environments. Again, it's like, yeah, by default that's the case, but I didn't hear it. Did you all talk about it? Did I miss it? I know we only have a minute or two, but what's your reaction to it? I'm looking at the heading. I'm like, hey, wait a minute, guys. When we meet together, I'm always like that guy, like, hey, wait a minute, are we just talking about everybody out there? Or are we intentional about some of these intersections of identity? Tell me about that, and where is that in the research?
So you do know that schools do professional development all the time, right? That's what they do. They have to come up with plans, they have to submit it, there's funding, it's geared towards it, right? And for a long time, when people were working on equity work, right, they would start with biases, right? And they'd have all these, what I will call equity centered traditional approaches for equity work. What I have found through this research is in the same way that we know that if dysregulated students are unable to learn and to intake information, same is also true for adults. And so in order to really center equity, there has to be internal work that's done. And that was what we found out from our doc students, was like, now they're ready to talk about equity. But until they did internal work with some of these SEL skills and competencies, they didn't have a lens or a skill set or a mindset or an internal process that would allow them then to get to this point. And so in some ways, we also we're like starting here. It's like starting with gifted, right? And not building foundational skills needed to get to that point. And
Okay,
so,
I hear you loud and clear. I hear you
yeah.
loud and clear. I mean, I'll settle for that, right? I'll settle. Do I have that luxury? I've not been asked to come back for PDs because of that. Oh yeah, this foundation is not there. It's too painful. I'm tired of the equity conversation. But even if I don't open my mouth as a Black person, as a person of color or whatever, it's still there. And so I hear you, but I'm still thinking, okay, then how do we quickly build that foundation and get to a point where, or is it embedded in here? You're saying these basic ways of treating humans is equitable and inclusive. I mean, I can live with that. But is it by default? Because if we're not careful, it's like, no. You see what I mean? I don't know, Jordan. You have any
I'm gonna
reaction
let
to that?
Jordan answer, but I don't think it's by default.
I also don't think it's by default. I think that that is the challenge of doing the work. Like I mentioned in the presentation, it requires this level of cultural competence to be equitable and to do equity SEL work. But it also requires engagement in that work to build your cultural competence. And so it's hard and you're going to make mistakes and there's going to be a lot of confrontation and a lot of very tough conversations and you're going to do it wrong.
But you're gonna do it.
And it's
But
the
you do it.
process. That's called the work. And it's about being humble, but that's the most difficult part to me is, how do I build my cultural competence to be more equitable? And, I want to be so equitable, but I have to build my cultural competence. You know what I mean?
I hear you. No, I hear you.
But
It's
add to
basically
that,
like
we're building
growing.
critical consciousness.
Mhm.
And you can't build critical consciousness without some of these skills and mindsets.
Exactly. That's what I heard you say. It was clear to me. I was just making sure that I honored the Diversity Research Action Consortium. We don't shy away from it.
Absolutely.
No one's
Yep.
paying for these presentations that you all are giving, right? You're compensated. You will be compensated, but it's free and open to the public. So this idea that the work that you're doing is meaningful, it's adding value, but also know that if we're not intentional, we can do more harm than good. And that's not what you all were saying. I just wanted to honor, hey, this is the title of your presentation. Did I miss it? And Jordan,
Well,
maybe I
and since
missed
this is
it.
recorded, I would also say this because it's not like our participants are reading our papers either.
Right.
But in there tells the story of our positionality.
Okay,
Jordan
good
and I
point.
are two white women, clearly.
Right,
If you
right.
visibly can see us, I identify as an LGBT person, but we dissect power, privilege, and intersectionality in every conversation
Right,
that we
right.
had.
And
And
that's
so
why we're
it's not,
having
I
it.
don't know that we actually missed it in the sense of like, I think we're so used to being embedded in that dialogue that we also weren't intentional about this piece. But I do want to share, it's because we continue to do work.
That's right.
This
It's
doesn't
always
end in that
happening.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
why I said it. That's why I'm saying it, right? I'm not going to
Continual
say it.
development. It
Yes.
is always
12:18 on the dot, folks. We can't thank you enough for your time. I promised that I would shut it down because we'll be here all day. You know how we do. And I love you for it. I'll talk to you all later. I have to run, and thank you very much for joining us.
And
I
good
will
luck,
post
Olga
it.
and Christina.
And if you don't
Yes,
mind,
thank
do
you
you share
both.
your PowerPoint slides or not? I mean, you can give a different version. We'll post it to the website. You figure out how you want to do that, and I'll be in touch
Okay.
with you all because I think we meet Monday. All right, you all have a great day.
All right. Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.